Fifth time's the charm.
Hey, it's green. It looks like we're on the internet.
Does that look like we're online now? Let's hope so.
It's pretty close. I mean, it's.
We are online.
Look at that green right there.
Yeah, we are online. Well,
Hey, try number 2. It's a charm or something, I guess.
well, let me try
Wow.
this out.
How's it going?
Good. Now that
Welcome
we're
to
finally
SonarFeed,
online.
episode 293, or as Susana likes to call it, Sex with Turtles.
I feel like I need some context for that.
It wasn't about people and turtles. It was just turtles.
Fair.
I'm just letting it go.
Yep. That's really.
So again,
that's course of
welcome
action.
to SonarFeed. I am your co-host, Tom Biro, a.k.a. Bougie Hooli. To my left, your right.
Mickey Turner SKUs, and I was definitely not late to today's episode.
All right. That's the story that we're going with.
Yes. There was technical difficulties.
How was your party that you attended?
It was very. Nice.
I mean, based on your outfit tonight, was that like a dare, or did you have to wear that?
It was a tacky themed Christmas party that I was invited to, and I had to break out the vest. I figured this was somewhat Christmas-y.
I was going to wait for you to say techie, and I'm going to be like, huh, okay.
No, tacky. So, yeah, it was good. They had a ton of wine. I only had one, so I'm relatively sober for.
You're like, I'm starting fresh
yeah.
here in Berliner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In 4th and Main.
Wow. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah, it's taken us a full year to get that down. So,
Has it been that long?
yeah, pretty much.
So there sadly is not a lot of Sounders stuff to
Nah.
talk about. I mean, we could talk about the departure of Jordan Morris from the singles market.
Okay, so I was offline, and I saw a brief reference to that. What's going on? He proposed. Is that what I'm
This
guessing
weekend.
happened?
The pictures look like she said yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Reported, allegedly,
At least a few photographers.
she said yes. It looks like a 2-camera shoot. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Maybe they were drones. Who knows?
2-camera shoot. How does that work? Just
Well, you get 2 cameras.
well,
and
I mean, what is the point of that? It's
again, like we could have 2 cameras at SonarFeed, one there, one over there, and we could like cut to one or the other depending on our
okay. That
focus
makes
point.
that makes sense for a broadcast show.
Have you been on Instagram?
All right, I'm not an Instagram influencer.
Have you
Yes.
watched? Have you watched the Taco Bell commercial, which is my favorite thing on television?
It is
right
actually
now?
a pretty great commercial. So
Sunset Hard Hands. Take the picture.
it is. Very
That's a
good.
real thing in real life that people do, and I don't understand it at all. But genuinely, congrats to Jordan Morris on getting engaged. Seems super exciting. There do appear to be a non-zero number of people who are very sad about this on the internet, and that's all I'm gonna say.
I'm
And then we'll
far,
just
far away. From
we'll just move
from
on.
that.
Other than that, it's been relatively quiet on the Sounders front for various reasons. One of which is Garth doesn't want to sign players because he doesn't know what the rules are next
yeah,
year.
that's
I'm just
quite a
gonna
problem.
bring that down.
Yes, yes.
To the center.
Mm-hmm.
But genuinely, there's one more CBA meeting before the end of the year? Is that what it
That's
was?
the rumblings, and then they're gonna
And then
shut
nothing
it
till
down.
January?
Yeah. So, and which is also good news for the start of the season happening on time, since training camp opens on January 11th for the Sounders, and for everybody else like a week later, and then CCL, starts up a month later. So it's the perfect time to take 3 weeks off before you get back to negotiations.
I mean, you could put it that way.
Yeah, sorry to be a downer.
I'm a little surprised at how this is going, considering the fact that the season ended a lot earlier, a whole month earlier, essentially, than in prior years. And given the fact that there's newfound attention on things like CCL, with some pretty significant market teams playing in the tournament.
Pretty much all the big ones.
Yeah, but literally all the big markets have teams playing in CCL. Like, it's a little weird that there doesn't seem to be a little bit of a, we're gonna throw all the rules out the door and just like focus on this and make it work.
Yeah, I think there's just, it's, CBA negotiations are always like that. It was kind of like this last time. They went down to the last minute before they actually got a deal in place. And this will be probably the same thing, is my guess, for a variety of reasons. They just can't ever do things ahead of time. And I guess how many leagues have those deals go down, months or years in advance? I think baseball is the only one that's really been able to kind of crack that nut.
Yeah, I would agree. NFL's in a different place right now. NBA feels similar. Like the risk of it keeps coming up.
Yeah.
I don't know. This feels not great. And maybe it's just that I've spent time talking to players and other folks. This seems like it may not go well.
I put the odds of a strike or work stoppage, however you want to call it, I put it about 50-50 about a month ago, and nothing's happened to change that.
Also, nothing's happened.
Yeah, that's also true. But
I mean, SKC signed a fairly significant player from North America, but that's the
those
part
aren't
to
the
me,
deals that are the problem.
No, not at all. But I think the fact that other teams are making significant moves does make it disappointing when you have like a DP level player at Sounders that has just left. And Garth's like, we'll figure it out next year. And I'm like, this is not, we'll fix it in post. Like, let's not do that at all. And again, a significant part of me is like, I can't say shit because they just won MLS Cup again.
Yes.
It's just the binge purge back forth, whatever you want to call it, of either the Sounders are trash for 3 months at the beginning of the season or they're trash for 3 months in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
And then somehow decide to be good in Q3. Let's not do that. It just
it's
doesn't
not
seem like a productive way to be a top team. Like, not that you have to compare MLS to EPL or, Bundesliga or whatever, but that doesn't happen elsewhere. And it is because of the calendar. At this point, I'm fairly convinced that it is all about that.
Yeah. Well, look at it this way. Garth said, oh gosh, it must have been about just after the season's ended, that they expect to lose a lot of people during the summer, the early part of the summer because of Copa America and the Euros, and that they were going to have to rely on kids to kind of fill the slack there.
So we're going to actually have a full roster for the first time in Garth?
Well, no, because then he said in the interview, which I think you're referencing, that they were going to rely on kids and go for it in CCL. So that means you've got the first part of the season where CCL is a problem and they're playing a bunch of kids, and then you've got the middle part of the season where you've got Copa America and Euros where they're going to rely on the kids. That's not a particularly great recipe to compete for, say, Supporter Shield.
So like
over
July, we'll think about being good. Again, bring it for CCL. Like, I would love to just house people in CCL. It's a big struggle, I think, for a lot of people to come off having won MLS Cup convincingly and have a really chill next 6 months.
Well, I think, and the other thing is, how do they think that the depth is going to perform? Is it going to improve over what they had last year when they were, terrible for,
the middle
part of the season? Yeah. Is Ocampo Chavez going to be able to come in and step in? Is Dylan going to be able to provide something? Is Leyva is kind of a different case, just because you're not expecting him to be a difference maker, quote unquote, per se, and score goals, but he's going to probably get a lot of run. And then beyond that, is Buana going to be able to finally take a step forward and provide something? So there's 4 slots that could potentially see, or 4 players who could potentially see significant amounts of time in the early and middle parts of the season, depending on who they lose for the summer tourneys. And then you've got obviously those guys potentially playing in the early part of the season. I mean, they'll have some buys in the first part of the season.
I mean, they're going to mix that up.
Yeah, so it's not like they're going to be playing every 4 days for the first 2 months.
And all of those players will play more minutes than Victor. Sorry, that's going to happen. Most of them are not going to be super dirty as wingers, which is the downer in the situation, because I think you saw what the fully operational battle station looked like with Jordan and Victor and other people out there on the field. It feels like a big risk to me right now. And again, I could be super wrong, and 30 days from now everything will be fine and whatever. But for right now, it feels like a uphill battle that shouldn't be as uphill as it appears to be.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where the CBA is a problem, because where you would normally be getting those depth and depth plus players, not quite TAM guys, but the guys who provide a lot of the depth on the team, like a Harry Shipp and a Will Bruin, the guys that they would be signing are not being signed right now by anybody because of the CBA. I mean, the only players that are really getting signed are TAM guys and DPs. And that's the case around the league. I mean, who else? Saad Abdul Salam signed. Okay, he signed a contract today, but he was already, picked up by Cincinnati. So that I'm talking about, signing free agents or just signing guys who are a bit better than your replacement level players. None of those guys are being signed anywhere in the league right now, and that's all down to the CBA, because no team is going to sign a $300,000 player and risk the cap only going up 5% or something like that. So that's a major problem, and I don't know what the solution is besides them getting a CBA done.
Well, you take the $325 million that Charlotte, North Carolina is going to pay to buy into the, I'm not going to use the phrase, thing that is MLS right now, and you figure it out, because the league's riding high right now, and I think the attention on soccer, football, whatever you call it, in the States is in a really great place. I'm going to say 68% because of the women's national team and the rest because of just MLS being hot in a number of markets, and the Liga MX just having a significant television impact on the States and getting like dramatic viewership, which is awesome. Them having a risk of a beginning of the season next year seems short-sighted at best.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of figure it out right now.
Yeah. I mean, you raise a good point with the $320+ million franchise fee that Charlotte's going to pay, which is almost 50% more than the last one, which is, or I guess Sacramento is like $250, I think, but still, that's an additional $75 million that Sacramento just paid the $250. 2 months ago, a month and a half ago?
Yeah,
and Charlotte comes in at $325. Yes, that's a hell of a market if you can get into it. So, I mean, I think the players' union is obviously going to take a look at that and say, all right, well, yeah, you guys need to raise the cap. You just pocketed $75 million increase in expansion fees, and though they're now at 30, and Garber will do his little spiel about them not wanting to go, not expand anymore or expand quickly, but they're going to go to 32 here, probably.
Just do it now.
By 2023, 2024 at the latest, I would say. They'll go to 32. They might stop for a little bit there, and for a little bit they might stop there, but they're going to add 2 more teams. It's I think if I had to guess, it'll be Vegas and oh gosh, it's a little rough on Team 32. I think Vegas is high on their list. 32, maybe Phoenix, although they're not very close. Detroit is dead. That's probably where the problem is. There's not a 32nd team. I think Vegas,
Like just off the top of your head. Yeah.
Vegas, I think is they're going to get it done. So that's just what I think. So I don't know who the 32nd team is because there's Athletic ran a story on the expansion, and basically none of the other expansion bids except for Vegas and Charlotte were really anywhere near having something done. So yeah, that's so there's going to be a couple more expansion teams if they can get Team 32, and then at that point we'll see what happens. But back to the CBA, they got. Again, I'm not confident they're close at this point. I think we talked about this last time. I think the MLS's strategy is the same as was last time, which is to drag this along and then at the last minute basically say you're going to ruin the league if you strike, and you guys don't have the money to have a prolonged strike. So, take our last offer, and we'll see if the Players Association actually, takes the bait this time around because they did last time. By all accounts. In fact, I know for a fact that's what happened because I talked to them and that's what they told me.
Do you think the players hold better cards this time? Or is it really
I mean, they have public sentiment on their side. There's a lot of money coming into the league. Some of the things they're asking for are not unreasonable. It's not like, you're talking millionaires fighting with billionaires. I mean, there are millionaires in MLS, but again, when you've got the supplemental players making $55,000 a year, it's kind of tough to claim that you got a bunch of spoiled players. So I think they have public opinion on their side, but that doesn't really account for anything. That's not going to pay your mortgage or your rent. So. Again, this is going to come down to whether they have the stomach to hold out and strike for a prolonged period of time. Because there's certainly a pain point for MLS. If they don't get the season underway, CCL goes away. And
so does CCL not get managed separately? It's the same
essentially
contractual
same.
terms.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The CCL is built into the CBA.
Okay.
They get there's bonuses for how well you perform. Same with like the Leagues Cup and Campeones Cup and all that.
Those are going to be great.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to have those added to the schedule.
Yeah,
not really.
Yeah. Well, think of how the strike would affect that. Do they cut the season down? Let's say they strike for the first month of the season. Do they try to make up 5 games in an already compressed MLS calendar with international breaks and all that stuff? So that there's not going to be any room to add those games, and that's a lot of lost attendance revenue for a high number of MLS teams. Atlanta 45K, Seattle will probably be up in the 42s this year after MLS Cup. Portland, Cincinnati, et cetera. Yeah, there's a few teams that won't feel as much of a pinch, but the league is still highly dependent on attendance revenue. So there is absolutely a point where MLS might, I don't know, cave is the right word, but they'll start to feel the crunch. Because their TV ratings are so terrible. I'm not sure how much the networks will really care. The reruns of cornhole do better than MLS games by and large.
I mean, drunk people have television as well,
Yes.
so is what it is. Time of day is a thing.
Yeah.
And again, we could probably spend 5 hours just talking about TV ratings and breaking down how the league has sold rights and so on and so forth. Some good comments in the chat. JJ suggests Boise. We haven't discussed Boise.
Boise for expansion.
Mike and others brought up Portland too. Hard no. Scusa. That's all I'm going to say. Right? Ford Madison? Yeah. They are just good enough at merchandising and being drunk that they would fit. I don't know, though, if I could say who the next other city would be. Like, if I were to just guess.
It's
But the thing is, at 32, MLS is stupid to not go to like overlap, like NFL style or MLB style, whatever. Like break it down between divisions, because they're like, you're gonna put a team right now in the West this season that's gonna be in the East a year from now. Like that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like it's super minor league.
Well, if they go with two Western teams, like say Vegas and Phoenix, then presumably at that point, I don't have a map in front of me, but when you're at 32 at that point, then you've got 16 and 16. I would prefer that they just not just you play your conference home and away. They would never do that because they want their LA New York matchups that
but like
do nothing
32,
in the ratings.
But 32, that's a good, or
it's a great number.
30, excuse me.
Yeah,
so it's
30 games. Yeah.
So
home and away,
30 games, and then do whatever else you want.
You can do your
point.
playoffs. You can still have your playoffs.
Right.
You can probably expand the playoffs.
Even from a like paying for your friendly or paying for your CCL or your whatever Open Cup, whatever the things are, like you could figure it out from a cost, like a ticketing perspective, that it wouldn't make a difference. I mean, at this point, it looks like for next year we have one less match for Sounders season tickets.
Yes. 18, right?
The cost is the same. And you know what? No one cares. It's like the NFL has talked about like removing 1 to 2 of the preseason games and like either adding a game to the season or just leaving it alone. And people are like, I'm okay with that because no one wants to go to preseason. Like it's a waste of money. You're still spending $11 for a Coors Light or whatever it is.
For players who are playing.
But like this is where I think forget the like purist argument and people who like supporter shield and other things. I think playing everybody in your half of the league home and home and that's it.
Yeah.
There's some like beauty to that.
It's great. I think it'd be great. And then you have them meet up in the playoffs. Or
It's just
MLS
more
Cup.
interesting. Create some scarcity. Like right now you basically play everybody in some weird combination and sometimes you're like, oh, we're gonna skip that one team this year. Or like you have this year, was it this year or last year? The decision day, there was a team with no game.
No, everyone
last year. No, there was.
Everyone played.
We've had a season with one team that didn't play.
Yes, we have absolutely had that before.
And you're like, so it's not. I mean, aside from decision day being a trash name for something, that doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah. Especially if that team's potentially in the running.
Yeah, that would be absolutely
for playoffs.
brutal.
Like it doesn't really make any sense to me. It just feels like they're still hacking it together more than they need to be at this level. Like you're going to charge somebody $300 million to enter your league. You should have your shit together.
Yeah. Well, look at Chicago. No coach.
Terrible branding.
Yeah. New York City. No coach. No stadium. Inter Miami. No coach. Season 3-ish months away, but preseason opens up in about 5 to 6 weeks. 4 weeks for the Sounders, but less than 4 weeks for the Sounders, and about 5.5 for everybody else. Inter Miami's been announced since 2013, and this is where they're at. So it's just it's surprising to see how far back some teams are.
Did you watch EPL yesterday? The NBC coverage at all?
Mm-hmm.
So the fan fest they did in Miami.
Yes.
I'm like, don't tell me that had nothing to do with this team coming into MLS. Like, it's absolutely interrelated. And you did see some random flags and signage and other stuff like in the fan groups in the city. Like, we're just trying to like drive attention to the city of Miami. Yeah. I mean, at least they've probably sold more tickets than Nashville.
Oof, yeah. That's brutal. That's a crazy story. I think
is it still 5,000?
I actually interviewed someone for that story for my podcast. They say it's now up to 6,100. So they've increased.
Isn't it like a 20,000 person?
Oh no, they're playing in Nissan Stadium. It's like 75,000.
But I'm saying what they're actually opening for soccer. Somebody had said was like 25. In the 20s. Yeah.
25.
So let's be clear. It's a great stadium. Like if you've been to Nashville,
Yeah, it's
like
good
where that
configuration.
stadium is,
Yeah.
even the layout for soccer is really, really cool. It's super walkable. It's just cool space. The fact that that's where they are, and they were able to drop that amount of coin on getting in the league is terrifying to me.
Yeah.
And that's where you sort of start bumping up against what we saw in like the 90s, 2000s in MLS, late 90s, where it was like, is this going to survive?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing right now?
Yeah, there was a conversation on the on Twitter. Alexi Lawless, who may or may not be listening to the pod, talked about how people complain that it's a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme, which it isn't from a legal perspective. But I understand where people come from with that argument, in that MLS relies for a significant amount of their income on those expansion fees, but that's not what their lifeblood is per se.
I mean, let's hope not.
Yeah, it just isn't, and it's not a pyramid scheme or Ponzi scheme in any real sense. The problem is obviously they don't get nearly what they need to get in television ratings and corporate support as opposed to those other leagues. But that by itself doesn't make MLS a Ponzi scheme per se, because if they were to get a good TV deal, then would that eliminate the Ponzi scheme status? It's that's just not something that really comes into play. But I'm good, thanks. But it's just the problem is they just haven't been able to monetize their their television deals to this point. But again, it's not a Ponzi scheme. The fans are getting what they pay for in the form of soccer entertainment. They're not scamming anybody out of that. The owners who are coming into the league are getting a team, and they're building equity and value, much like every other sports team around the league and in the world. So it's I understand why people say it, because it's a catchy phrase, and it's kind of an ad hominem, just a way to attack the league. But they have their issues for sure, and I think some of those have to do with just where soccer is in this country as a sport, where MLS is as a league relative to other sports leagues, and that's just, they haven't figured out a way to solve that puzzle yet. So we'll see what happens.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to show you this right now.
Give it the title of this next episode.
I don't like where that slow motion's going. All right,
We're just going to, if you've been on Instagram.
gonna move along from that.
Wow, I'm uncomfortable right now.
Yeah.
I'm never looking at my phone ever again.
Yeah.
Thanks, Susana.
There's nothing.
JJ points out, 2007, Toronto, 10 million.
Incredible. Yeah, and
That's insane.
Yeah, they've increased the value of that particular franchise by 30 times, because they're worth over 300 million now. Sounders got in at 30 or 40, and so they're like 10x of what.
But that's where
they were.
Again, at the bare minimum, your current clubs, whatever you want to call them, have to be worth what the buy-in is for the league.
Yeah.
At the minimum.
Mm-hmm.
If Sounders are not worth 10x more than a future Charlotte, like, we're all in trouble at the end of the day.
I mean, there's always a couple of teams that are gonna be anchors. Colorado, for example, I think they're only worth like 160 or 170, and that's the same in every league. If you go through the NHL, there's it might be like the Ottawa Senators or one of those teams is not worth the highest MLS team. So there's always a few of those that are, and that's just a function of the market size, stadium popularity, et cetera, et cetera. So it's that's not overly surprising, but there are going to be a few teams that are just kind of stragglers in that way, because there's going to be there are winners and losers in sports,
Sure.
On the field and off, and not everyone can
Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, NFL is probably a poor example because pretty much all of those teams are worth $1 billion. But there's, again, there are still a few that are on the low end of that spectrum. It's just everything's relative to to
It
what the
just
value
seems
is.
it's staggering to me, and you bring up the Sacramento example, which is why to me that popped. Not that 300 plus million wasn't already a ridiculous number.
That-
It just
That's
seemed
genuinely
like
shocking.
the
Charlotte.
turn on that just seemed crazy.
Yeah, I mean, as is pointed out in the comments, some has their role to play. Although I'm not 100% convinced that
Is this so that how they figure out how to pay the women's national team the amount of money they actually deserve?
well, no one knows what sum is specifically is, so it's impossible to say. If someone wants to email that to me or send it to my Dropbox, I'd be appreciative of that. But sum is absolutely a valuable property, and it makes a lot of money for the owners, and that's part of the reason why they buy in to MLS. But I'm not 100% convinced it's worth as much as people think. But I think what's going to happen is with the World Cup coming in 2026, that's when you're going to see the big cash in, and then you'll probably see a few owners who have been in there for the long haul, bail at that point. Like the Houston Dynamo owner, spends no money. He's probably they're probably one ripe to once the World Cup comes around, and if it goes reasonably well, which it should, then you're going to see a massive spike in interest income.
Yeah.
That some valuation is going to go through the roof, and then you can see a couple of guys cash out. But again, back to some, I'm not 100% convinced it's raking in $1 billion a year or something like that, or $500 million a year. At this
I guess
point.
just right now the expansion pace feels like, especially if they have to if they have to write those checks now.
What the hell?
I don't even know what just happened, but if you like lime, anyway,
That, wow.
this is what the expansion money gets you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's too much lime. And by too much, I mean just the right amount. No, but seriously, if that expansion money comes in lump sum, and it doesn't appear to always be that way. It sounds like
No,
sometimes it's like a chunk,
Yeah, there's
and then
some
you pay it
payments,
off over
yeah.
some period of time.
Yeah.
But even if it's like a 5 to 10 year swing, those are staggering amounts of money coming into MLS.
Yeah, $30 million
And-
a year is not too bad.
And like we're not at the point where when like Beckham came into the league that it was just about haves and have-nots, and ownership happened to be able to pay a player of that stature, or the league ownership happened to be able to buy into that, or whatever. We're not at that point right now, and the teams that have 2+ designated players can, generally speaking, afford to play those players,
Yeah.
probably themselves,
Yes.
without the league or whomever else
Yeah.
jumping in on that. So, like, where is it going?
Where's the sum money going?
Yeah, no, where is the expansion money going?
Oh, yeah. Well, the general principle is that it's to pay the owners.
How do I even
for-
drink this?
I don't know. I'm not sure I would try. The expansion money. The premise is that it's to pay the previous owners for the dilution of their shares in MLS and some, which does kind of seem Ponzi schemish or pyramid schemish. But that kind of ruins my initial point. But that's the general principle behind it which is financially sound. So those owners are getting a chunk of money to pay off because they're going to get less out of the sum operating agreement. That's how it typically
But
works.
like that just feels like awkward justification. This isn't like the Nationals buy into MLB and have to like pay the Baltimore Orioles for rights about
Yeah.
paying attention to sports in their area. Like, how far is Charlotte from the next team? Like, it's a decent distance. Like, we're not degrading the viewership of other ownership. Like,
no.
we're talking about like dividends in the future.
Yes.
Like, this is like stock market level
Yeah,
discussion,
100%.
which, to be honest, is bullshit. If you want to talk about like genuinely wanting a league to be successful, And if people are playing it that way, like, that's why when you see folks who are critical of leagues like MLS and others, this is why. Like, for this kind of stuff, is because it's not about the success of the league and soccer in America or whatever the hell you want to call it. It's like, I need to make my shareholders money in 12 years. And you're like, great.
Well, yeah, and I think part of that is because MLS is, as Garber says, they're still in a growth/investment phase because they still can't get those TV dollars. If they could get that, that would, not to say it would solve all their problems, but that would, at that point, you're seeing a massive increase in investment in the league, most likely, which means better players, better infrastructure, better development. But they haven't been able to justify that increase as of yet because of the terrible TV ratings, lack of market relevance for like 70% of their teams, lack of TV presence.
Well, that's where
ESPN,
like, are we using
lack of media presence?
Are we looking at TV ratings too highly for this league?
That's an excellent question to put to someone above my pay grade,
outside of any of our pay grades. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know what ESPN and Fox and Univision or Telemundo or 2 now, what they think. The TV deal is up at the end of 2022, I think, maybe 2023, but in the next, the next three or 4 years, and if they seem to think that they're still going to get a decent TV deal right now, for those who don't know, they make. Between MLS and the U.S. Soccer Federation, they make $90 million a year, 60 of which goes to MLS, and the remaining 30 goes to the U.S. Soccer Federation. $60 million is nothing. That's $3 million a team, and that was when there was 20 teams. So now it's like, 2.7 or something like that. And now that they're at 26, and they'll be now at 30 with the announcement tomorrow. So that's even less. So what they're at, 2? Is that 2 now? Yeah, they get 60, and they'll be 30. Yeah, it's $2 million a team for your TV deal. That's pathetic. That's nothing. So it's no wonder that MLS has been somewhat reticent to, increase, just with the salary cap and just raise it, substantially, because. Again, $2 million gets you nothing in the world of sports. And so that's why they're really pushing to do whatever they can to, number one, goose the ratings, but number two, get a substantial increase on the TV deal. And they're going to have to beg, borrow, and steal to probably get that done because, ESPN and FS1 or Fox probably overpaid for the last TV deal because their TV ratings were terrible. But
it's super okay if Fox overpays for something.
Yeah, well,
I'm good with that.
So with that in mind, it's no wonder that they've been kind of slow to increase investment on the player side. So you're basically asking the league and the owners to lose money to further investment with no guarantee on return, at least in the immediate future. Of course, the valuations would suggest that they're doing just fine in their growth phase. And then you've got, again, the World Cup in 2026, which is probably going to make a couple $2 billion for the a combination of FIFA and the Federation and some and MLS. So that's,
and by the way, if there's no fucking games in Seattle, we should riot. Like actual riot. Yeah. But like
I feel like I have no information on this. I don't think they put their formal proposal together. But I would be shocked if Seattle doesn't get one of the bids.
Bump a little bit on this because Hunch Punch brings up something that I've talked about. Like I've talked about on the show. I've talked about with Taylor Graham. We've talked about with the league. And this is the thing that like the NFL nails. Major League Baseball's pretty good at it. Other sports are a little inconsistent. NBA is pretty good at it, but it's still, you play enough games, it's different. Like you play 80 games, like it looks different. But like NFL, you basically play at 4 times, maybe 5 in an entire week. It's like 1 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Eastern. What is it?
5:25 Eastern on Sunday.
Eastern.
Yeah.
Monday night,
8:25.
Thursday night.
Yeah.
And the Thursday night's not the whole season.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Just in a 2-day period, Sounders, this season was actually pretty good. 2 years ago, I think Sounders played at something like 17 different times.
Yeah.
That's insane. If
That-
you played 34 games and they were at 17 different times.
Yeah.
And it was like every other half hour and so on. Like, pick a thing.
Well, and they did that.
And
like
this is why
3
the
years
NFL,
ago.
but the NFL, though, did this for 50 years.
Yeah.
And they drilled it down on people.
Yeah.
And it, like, created routine. And that's a thing that MLS does not have.
Yeah.
And even right now, they've tried to be like, oh, we're going to be deferential to college football or the NFL or what. Who cares? Your overlap is not as high as you think. The TV overlap is, like the channel overlap might be.
Yeah.
But if you just said all games are 1-4-7, like 6 windows, 2 days, maybe you play a Friday night game. Because to be honest, the Friday night game's great.
Actually, my
I'm a huge fan.
My goal would be so now there's we'll say with the 30 teams, so that's 15 games in a week. That I would like to have 2 or 3 games on a Friday, and then 4 on a Sunday, and then 8. I guess that would be 8 on Saturday. So you've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday MLS games. You can schedule them however you like. That'd be perfect. And you don't have to. They don't. The Saturday ones are probably not going to be national TV games because, especially in the fall and the spring, because you've got other commitments that are much higher. But that would be my ideal thing, is to have a weekend of soccer. You've got games on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, set times. You go from there.
Right.
And,
And if a team has to punt because they play CCL or they do something else, that's
sure,
fine.
sure. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's what like EPL does. Like, again, there was a game today. Like, Palace played today. Like, games move because you have FA Cup or other stuff going on, and that's all right. Liverpool is moving games because they're playing in Club World Cup. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But like the inconsistency, I really, really think is an issue that we are not taking seriously enough, because I can think of 0 other sports that I pay attention to that have this level of random. So like,
that's
if you watch hockey, it's 7 or 7:30 any night. Maybe you play a daytime weekend game or like a holiday game or something like that. But it's basically the same time every single game, 80 times a year. And
MLS,
when like MLS can't, like, Sounders might play 5 games in one season that happen to play at the same time. And that just, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, there, as you said, with having to punt games, that's something that the other leagues don't typically have to deal with because there are not international competitions.
Sure.
So sometimes you're going to lose a weekend game, or you're going to have to move something. And with the international calendar, that's something that other leagues don't have either.
But like, it feels, I'm sorry, if as a co-stadium tenant at CenturyLink Field, Sounders should be able to go, half of our games are at this time, half of our games are at this time. Like, it's real easy. NFL schedule comes out super early. MLB schedule, which does affect them because of parking and other things.
Yeah, they don't have
like,
them at
they
the same
can't have
time.
full stadium house at certain dates, etc. I get it. It is complicated. They should be able to make it less than 17 times that we have games. And MLS doesn't seem to want to like push on that. They seem to defer more than they want to push. And the reason that MLB, NFL, XXXXX other league have gained viewership is because they forced their own issue. And they're like, we are habit. MLS does not want to be habit.
Yeah. I mean, like as you said, they tried that 3 years ago, I want to say, with the Soccer Sunday. They had the games at 2 and 5 o'clock.
Which is
they
great.
They didn't stick with it, but they tried it.
But that's where, like, decision day, you're like, oh, great. You came up with one day of your entire season where everyone plays at the same time. I don't know. It just seems like they should be able to force that a little bit. And it feels like they want to defer or just like let other people decide stuff and then be like, oh, well, it'll be okay. We'll just do this.
Yeah.
No, like that isn't how this should be playing.
Well, it's not going to get any easier because now that the teams aren't playing, you're not doing a home and away schedule, or at least some approximation of that, with playing every team in your division and then playing all the East Coast teams. Now you're not even playing all the East Coast teams now. And then I'm still trying to figure out how they're going to determine who doesn't play who in that scenario, because are they going to go with a NFL parity equalizer calculation? Are they just going to decide, well, we want the LA-New York matchup, so we're going to have them play? There's got to be some competitive balance issues there. I was talking to a source earlier, and they said they don't know what MLS is going to do at this point, and they should know. I can say,
but the NFL schedule works real well if we get to the right number of teams. It's like,
well, sure.
So you play everybody in your half twice, so home and home, so you get to 30, and then you play 4 other teams. And like the rotation in NFL, like there's actual like beauty to that. Where like, oh, this season we play NFC East, whatever the hell it is.
Well, there's usually one game where you're playing like a high, a team that finished well the year before, because again, that's the parity.
Well, they also do the weird rematch the first game of the season and like other stuff like that. Like, you can criticize all you want. I definitely do. They've figured out the math on people and just like manipulating folks into like wanting different things, and MLS has, I think, failed to catch that. We do have a couple of comments.
Oh, you lost it. Where'd it
go? There you go. How's the rest of the league gonna deal with LAFC's pocketbook?
I would say there are certain teams that will do it just fine. Atlanta will continue to spend. The Galaxy, Toronto, Inter Miami, once they get their act together. The Sounders to a lesser extent. But, Colorado, they're just not going to. Interestingly, New England...
They could take all that Tim Howard money, though, and spend it on something.
That might be the worst contract ever given. I mean, I understand why they did it. It was just, spending $2 million for a goalkeeper is just one of the more insane contracts in the history of the league.
They didn't like Zach McMath at all.
Yeah, that was that's crazy. But again, the league, the owners, most of the owners could afford to do so if they wanted to. In fact, all of them could. Some of them are obviously less rich than others. Like Jay Sugarman from Philly is, he's relative to MLS owners doesn't have very much money, but Stan Kroenke in Colorado has more money than he knows what to do with. He just doesn't want to spend it. Up until this year, Bob Kraft was kind of he had more money than than a ton of the owners in MLS. He's finally spending, so I guess we gotta cut him a little slack.
He's spending on his legal defense.
Well, yes, and I'm trying to think of a couple of more who, Houston's owner. Again, these guys all have they're rich, 5-10 times over, but they may not be LAFC rich, where you've got the multi-billionaire
50 owners.
Or Charlotte coming in. Tepper's going to be the richest guy in MLS.
Which is staggering.
Yeah. It's interesting to see he wanted in and he forced his way in. I mean, kind of you got to admire him just pushing the envelope on that score. And MLS was never going to turn down someone with that kind of.
That's, by the way, the cleanest place I've ever been to. That's a city.
Charlotte?
Oh my God!
I've only been there. I've been like once. In my life.
I would actually like cook food and toss it on the sidewalk and just eat it. I'm being totally serious. I was there for New Year's Eve 2002. And was staying like in the core downtown, walked down to the stadium to check out the football stadium, 2002, 2003, somewhere on there. I'm like, this is beautiful. You can, by the way, just walk in the stadium in the middle of the day and like tour it just for free. And people are just hanging out outside. Like, it was beautiful. It was chill. It was a cool town. Actually, kind of an interesting place, I think, for MLS. I'll be curious as to how that goes.
Yeah, so I kind of compare it to Nashville at this point, just because, again, they're both playing in large NFL stadiums.
Yeah.
Both southern-ish cities. They're both, have very, very wealthy owners. But they didn't really, neither of them had an existing fan base for professional soccer. The Charlotte's youth scene is pretty good from what I've heard. But as far as like the professional scene, the Charlotte Independents do next to nothing. Some of that is related to some underlying issues, but again, they've just not been able to really establish a foothold. In Nashville,
That was really good lawyer speak.
yes,
I'm proud of you.
trying not to get sued. But Nashville's kind of the same. It was kind of the same way coming in, but they managed to get it over the line through kind of force of will and an assist from the local government, who is fronting the majority of the cost of their new stadium. Of course, now there's lawsuits coming about because of that, but in Nashville. But Charlotte probably is not going to have those issues because just of the way the deal is structured. But they're both coming in with a substantial amount of public funding and billionaire owners, and MLS is obviously saw the dollar signs and was like, all right, this is fantastic. But again, the only thing I would worry about is whether you're going to see a Nashville redux where you didn't really have a soccer culture on the professional level, and therefore you're going to end up with 7,500 season tickets. Now, Atlanta is the counter argument to that, which they, again, they had no professional soccer culture whatsoever coming in, but blew it out of the park. So
They figured it out. The density was just right.
Yeah.
From a stuff to do standpoint, that was a good play. The stadium's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think they actually also cross-marketed pretty well between.
Absolutely, 100%.
They
Kind
did
of
a
the
really
Seahawks,
good job there.
Kind of what the Seahawks or the Sounders and Seahawks did.
I think they figured that out, which doesn't exist anymore now.
Yeah.
By the way, that
That partnership,
overlap.
no.
I'd be really curious to see how that goes. I think the stuff to do in town thing has a lot to do with the success of teams at this point.
Yeah. It's a proven model at this point. The Sounders, I think, basically, to bring up a phrase, invented that with how they came in with a centralized stadium location, good soccer culture, and just being able, you're not tailgating, you're just hitting the bars before and after the game, and there's just again, stuff to do. And if that centralized location is something that Charlotte has, again, I haven't been there in forever, and I've never been to Nashville, then they may have some success. I think Nashville, I talked to a guy from Tim Sullivan. He's a reporter out there from who covers all the Nashville stuff. He seemed to think that a lot of it just has to do with how Nashville is when it comes to sports that are not NFL or college football, I guess. Although Nashville has Vanderbilt, so not
Nashville's
great,
soccer scene,
shakes,
youth
there.
soccer scene's actually pretty good. I have a good friend that I've known for 15 years who is a keeper coach, and that's his side gig, and he makes a considerable amount of money being people's one-to-one keeper coach. So the soccer attitude, love, whatever you want to call it, is there. It just doesn't exist formally as we've, I think, seen elsewhere. I mean, we have a different animal here. Even the whole West Coast is like this, but it's definitely there. It's just going to be interesting to see if it can translate to what downtown and stuff to do group gets into. But I have to say, Predators caught on real fast, and people made fun of Nashville getting a hockey team forever.
Yeah.
And aside from them being good, it's
That helped.
core located, it's near hotels and bars and restaurants. It's a thing to do on a weeknight.
Yeah.
So business people have an event to go to at 7:30 at night on a Tuesday, and it'll be interesting to see if where the Nashville team plays now in that football stadium works out because it's just at the end of the line. Like you could walk to it from downtown. So it's a pretty easy little trip. I will say though, as away trips go, like Nash Vegas away, we should all go to that, and it's going to end really poorly for everyone. If you like live music,
I've only been through Tennessee a couple of times, so I've not been on a formal or proper away trip, as they say. And I'm definitely looking forward to checking it out.
It's called Nash Vegas for a reason.
Delightfully tacky, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's amazing. The food's actually cheaper. Better is hard to say. Better on like a casual sense than actual Vegas. But it's got that same kind of vibe. And you've been to Las Vegas before, so you understand this. Yeah. You're like, oh, did we actually do that? Did we go to 17 bars yesterday? Because that seems like 14 too many. No, Nash Vegas is actually super lovely. I'm excited for them to join the league. I don't know what's going to happen right now. Like, I'm a little concerned about the fact that it's December and we're talking about 6,100 or whatever season tickets, and maybe it won't matter. And the walk-up crowd would be amazing. Like, who knows? For all we know, their tickets are $10, and you're going to walk up. Like, who knows?
Yeah, I think as far as what they look like in 3 months, because there are still, about 3 months before the season starts. So they'll have some ramp up with, the draft, quote unquote. So that'll be an event where they can kind of goose sales, jersey releases, all that fun stuff. So they'll be able to kind of, ramp that stuff up and hopefully increase ticket sales. But I think everyone out there concedes that it's not great. It wasn't a good start. And there are a number of reasons for that. Having to do with not marketing the team, not spending the money, not doing the outreach that you need to do. Again, that's stuff that they should have done. There's not really an excuse for them not to do it. But I'm going to assume it's just down to them not wanting to spend the money. But that's not a good reason. You would think that these owners coming in now would have looked at the success stories and emulated those. And spent the time and effort and resources into doing it, because there are teams that have clearly shown how it can be done. Yeah. LAFC, Atlanta, it's Orlando at the start was fantastic. NYCFC was decent. The Sounders going a little bit further back, Toronto. So there's a formula that they could have easily, installed or tweaked for their own purposes. It just seems in Nashville's case they just did not expend the effort necessary, and this is what they get as a result.
Hunch Bunch wants to know, how much GAM do we get for being the team of the decade? Dude, in all seriousness, how mad are other teams right now about that?
It's mostly Galaxy fans because they're
That's
really
actually, forget Portland. People are like, Portland's going to be so pissed. I'm like, don't care. Portland missed the playoffs 50% of the time. LA Galaxy pissed.
Galaxy fans shut up to games like they show up.
I agree that the Sounders were the rightful winners, and the Galaxy have a fair claim. I don't think anybody's going to claim that they don't, but they had a couple. Yeah, they have a couple of just glaring red marks on their record. Like the wooden spoon that by itself is almost disqualifying, from the award, and missed the playoffs another time, and they've been pretty mediocre to terrible since 2015 when the Sounders knocked them out of the playoffs. And yeah, it's 2015 that they knocked them out. And so that makes it even though Sounders have a couple less of the supporter shields in the MLS Cups, I think consistency is something you should.
They're all like
reward.
first to 5. And we're like, don't care.
Yeah, considering two of those didn't happen in the decade, so those don't really count for anything. But yeah, I think it's a well-deserved. The Sounders deserved it, and yeah, the Galaxy have a claim, but they maybe shouldn't have finished last.
Maybe they should actually play in Los Angeles. Weird. I would say, and we talked about this before LAFC even joined the league. I think the Galaxy get dusted, like in the long term in LA. They are the Angels.
Oh, yeah. That's
In this
interesting.
discussion.
It's an interesting analog.
I just, aside from the like proximity thing, the population center is actually moving back down to the city proper.
Yeah.
Which was literally not a thing 5 years ago, let alone 10, 15 years ago.
It's crazy how
Like
how
people are
that's
moving
changed.
back downtown. Those buildings have been empty.
Yeah.
Their office buildings are empty or hotels, and people are coming back in that direction, and they're gonna become LAFC
yeah.
fans. And it's really, really interesting to see just like demographics shift.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm actually curious to see about Fire, like branding aside. Them going back to Soldier Field or going to Soldier Field is a brilliant move. It's going to completely change the attention span, and it will either prove that Chicago gives a shit about soccer or not.
Yeah. Or
Once
the-
and for all.
Yeah. Well, again, they have their own issues too. Again, they have no coach at the moment, and they have like 6 players. So that rebrand, as it were, is
Thanks,
also about the worst.
MLS.
They just cannot get out of their own way.
Do you
when it
think
comes
that
to
they'll win the
Chicago.
World
It's
Cup?
incredible.
Though?
Not with only 5 players and no coach.
Adam very much wants to talk about January 22nd versus Pennyroll.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing Sounders soccer again. I don't know.
I really enjoy the Defiance
Yeah.
playing soccer
It-
in foreign countries.
I mean, I'm looking forward to this. The preseason starting, which is crazy. We're about 3 weeks out from the first practice, and they're going to be gone for a significant part of it. They'll probably practice for like 2 days up here and then head out to California, because this is the earliest they've ever opened up a season or training. It'll be good to see them on the field again. I mean, there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to glean from this. Again, the CBA or lack thereof is going to be hovering over this thing like a cloud. Not that it'll affect their training per se, but again, they may not have a full roster when they go play that game. They've got 20 players signed right now. They'll bring in a couple of their
That's still more than
draft
started in
picks.
Colorado a couple seasons ago,
Yeah,
so that's cool.
Yeah. Well, this season in Colorado, they only had they
Oh,
had to
that
bring
was,
up
oh my
two-
God, that was Kansas
Yeah.
City. There's a Kansas City with 16.
Colorado was only 14 or 15. They had a hardship call.
That should be illegal.
Yeah, it would be nice if they didn't play over international breaks. We'll see how that works out this year.
Weird.
Again, the MLS says it's up to the teams. So again, and the Sounders didn't play any home games during the international break. They played a couple of away games. Again, to be fair, the Colorado one was a rescheduled game because of that.
Yes.
That blizzard.
Snow.
Yeah, the snow that never came. Actually,
That was a good story, by the way. I was literally at the AC, and I got a phone call, and they were like, "What are you guys going to do if we cancel the game?" And I'm like, "Wait, you're going to cancel the game?"
yeah, that's you're burying the lead here.
I think it was the night before. And they're like, yeah.
Yes, about the game.
So about the game. Good times.
Yeah.
So it's 9:00. Apparently we're having a show next week. You may or may not be here.
Oh, on the 23rd, that seems unlikely.
Yeah. We are actually going to have a show. It's going to be basically Susana talking about turtles. And my mom. Yes. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, threats, opinions, send them to
Tom at Bougie Hooli on Twitter.
send them to SonarFeed on Twitter, and we will discuss them for a good 90 minutes next week at the Berliner Pub in downtown Renton. And Carrie is so happy that we're going to be here. She demands a snow.
A snow.
A snow.
And we'll check the forecast.
I think she probably meant show.
Oh, that makes more sense.
But I'm going to go with this. SonarFeed.
That is
Megan is fired.
Yeah, that's absolutely awful.
So, anyway, have a good night, y'all. Thanks. See you next week.